How we doing, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Richie Hicks Jr. Sports Podcast. I am your host, Richie, here with my good friend, Mr. Mike Zappi, out in San Antonio, Texas. How you doing, buddy?
Ooh, you know exactly how I'm doing, sir. It is a good day today in Texas, especially for the Texas Rangers.
Yeah, you're definitely excited about that move. Max Scherzer is headed to the Rangers. Details are still emerging in this deal, mainly because they're trying to figure out which prospects are going to be coming over on the return, in addition to trying to figure out the monies. That is the big holdup. But Max Scherzer did waive his no trade clause. So Max Scherzer will be headed to Texas to reunite with former teammate Jacob deGrom, who was on the mend. That's kind of an interesting caveat to it. Honestly, failed move on the Mets' part initially with the combination of Verlander and Scherzer. So I do think that this is important for the Mets to try to move on from expensive assets, basically.
Yeah, and I think I spoke to you yesterday, and I was like, it wouldn't surprise me. Or the one thing I'm looking forward to is I think the Rangers are going to make a deal with the Mets because of the whole Jack Leiter going to play in New York where his father played, and I really think that he's going to be included in this trade. I wanted to say Brock Porter, but I can't see it because Brock Porter was drafted to be a closer, and they have Edwin Diaz coming back next year, so there would be no point in having two of those. So I think you're going to look at guys that maybe like a Luis Angel Acuna or even an Evan Carter because they did draft, I can't even remember his name, the player out of Florida this year with the number 4 pick in the MLB draft who also happens to play outfield. So it's almost one of those where I'm expecting them to move on from Evan Carter and as well as Jack Leiter. Obviously, they can't trade Kumar Rocker because he did have Tommy John surgery a couple months ago, so no one's going to trade for that. But it's very interesting, man. I like it because the reason why I like this trade too is Max Scherzer is coming with a 2024 club option of $43 million. So in a way, this is almost you go all in. If Max Scherzer performs, Texas has the payroll to be able to afford him and deGrom, and they're going to have themselves a very interesting situation next year when deGrom does, in fact, come back. But I love this trade, man. I really do. I think it's a good one. You get an excellent ace with the experience of playing at the highest level in the World Series. We saw him pitch a great World Series against the Astros. And, just that veteran presence that we lost when deGrom got hurt, now we get that back. And I think that's going to go a long ways because if you look at some of the games as of late, it's like they're missing that especially with the pitching rotation, just that guy that can kind of get them going. And, bringing in a Aroldis Chapman was the first step. Now you bring in a Max Scherzer, and I still believe they're one trade away. And I think there's a guy that they're currently playing against this weekend in San Diego that I think something's telling me that the Rangers are going to make a move for Josh Hader out there and get him over to Texas.
I mean, it would pretty much solidify the pen because while Aroldis Chapman is an upgrade over what you had going, I don't necessarily think that Aroldis Chapman is the end-all be-all answer. So if you are able to scoop Hader, yeah, I mean, I know that off air we have spoken about possibly the Yankees being in on Juan Soto. I, for one, think that they're going to actually make a move on Bellinger.
Yeah, and I think when you look at the Yankees and you look at what they're doing, I mean, you had a very good point. You're talking about Juan Soto, 24 years old, who a lot of people tend to believe that he has not come into his full potential yet. But then you have Cody Bellinger, who's only 27, 28 years old, and he's been playing at a more consistent basis. You had a great point about that. And you look at a guy that's hitting 319 over a guy that's hitting 266. Soto's only got a few more home runs than him. So I think that would be actually an excellent move because it's not going to require you guys to dump the likes of a Jason Dominguez or an Austin Wells, which I don't think you're going to trade Austin Wells, but the demand for a Bellinger is going to be a lot less than the demand for a Juan Soto.
And I do think that given his availability and given that he's taken decent care of his body, despite him being an older player, I still think that he can manage to stay on the field and help a Yankee team that right now is having an identity crisis, particularly with the offense. As I titled the show, Mad Max on the Move, Training Camp Injuries, and One-on-One Blows, that we're going to get into some of these training camp fights. But the other part of this title was, can the Yankees stop the offensive woes? Tonight, Giancarlo Stanton and Aaron Judge have both homered. The Yankees currently lead the Baltimore Orioles 3-2, still in the early going there.
4-2.
4-2, excuse me. After a frustrating defeat yesterday when Garrett Cole truly pitched a gem, Santander walks it off last night in the ninth. Yankees literally could not get a run across. They lost 1-0, just a tough one. Tonight, albeit it's not August yet, but yeah, I would say tonight's a must win.
Yeah, it's definitely a must win, and I think tomorrow is also a must win, especially because the trade deadline is only 3 days away now. And if we're talking about you guys being, what would you be, 10 and a half games back of Baltimore and a little further back in the wild card, it's kind of one of those, a lot could change here. And I think it's imperative that the Yankees win these next 2 games just to kind of stay there. And it's going to give them the answer they need. Are you going to be buyers or are you going to be sellers this coming trade deadline? And I think you're going to be buyers. You need to be buyers.
Yeah, even in years that the Yankees aren't exactly putting out a championship product, they have always, for the most part, had a propensity to be buyers. I mean, last time I remember the Yankees being sellers, you got to go back to right before the Baby Bombers when they weren't that good. But, they kind of were just kind of like in transition. It was like, shortly after Jeter's retirement, and they were just kind of like a middle of the road team. And that was when they decided to shave some of those bad contracts off the books, And then before you knew it, the Baby Bombers put together a hell of a season in Joe Girardi's final year at the helm. It's going to take more than a Bellinger to turn this ship around. But I do believe that, you can never have enough pitching. And the New York Yankees would do themselves a service by looking into getting another starter. I think that the bullpen all year has been the backbone of this team. But having said that, you can never have enough pitching. And I do think that towards the back part of that rotation, there are some question marks. Severino has been incredibly inconsistent. I think the consensus around most Yankee fans is that he will not be back next year. And then you take into consideration that, yes, Domingo Germán pitched a perfect game. He pitched a perfect game against a terrible team. But if you look into the numbers, he has not been consistent. Carlos Rodon, coming off his best performance of a short sample size of a season for him, he's supposed to be their number 2. And Nestor Cortez has yet to return. I'm hoping within the next week or so we get to see Nestor. But, ultimately – it's more about the future, but the Yankees are indeed running out of time this year. They got to start winning some series and continuing their push, because if not, they're going to be sitting home.
Oh, so there's something interesting here that's developing right now. On Twitter, per Mark Feinsand, he's out of the New Jersey area. Max Scherzer has not yet waived his no trade clause, and as of right now, it's not happening. So it almost begs the question of whether is the backup going to be Texas goes after Verlander if this falls through.
I'm not convinced that it's going to fall through. I think they're going to get it done.
Yeah, I do too. But it's interesting. It really is interesting about this whole how this is all going to play out.
For the first time ever, I actually changed the title during the show. I just put a question mark on Mad Max on the Move.
Nice. It's going to be. I'm loving it.
I don't necessarily know why he would want to stay with the Mets. I really don't. When Texas has a bigger window, and at the end of the day, he's pretty old. I'm not. Then again, I was also kind of shocked that he took ended it up in New York. I didn't see that coming either. So,
it excites me too.
Verlander back to Houston makes a lot of sense to me. It eerily reminds me of the Aroldis Chapman trade to the Chicago Cubs to only re-sign with the Yankees in the offseason. That's what that has written on it.
Yeah.
Breaking: Scherzer to Texas. Just now, Max Scherzer has approved the trade, sending him from Mets to Rangers. It's official.
There we go.
Mark Feinstein. I think that's the guy you just mentioned, correct?
Yeah.
I'm looking at it right now, and it's on my MLB app. All right.
There we go. All right. So
All right. Travis Kelce, want to make a mention of this, coming out of Chiefs training camp, called himself out and flat out said, I have to be a better leader. 2 consecutive days in a row, he has had an altercation with a teammate. Today being Jack Cochran, backup linebacker. Yesterday, one of their defensive backs. Both incidents, according to what I read, occurred when his teammate, after the play, was trying to rip the ball out of his hands. According to Andy Reid, he disparages any and all fighting because he says it's wasted energy. He says if it's a real game, you get tossed. But I think Travis Kelce is doing the right thing by taking the first step, which is acknowledgement. Earlier in his career, he did have a propensity for getting tossed out of games. One particularly stood out against Jacksonville when he threw a towel at a referee. He admitted that he has struggled with keeping his emotions in check. So I don't necessarily think this will be a big thing, but it is, I guess, at minimum, something to keep an eye on.
It was
also,
have you watched the video of today's incident?
We're talking about the one here in KC?
Yeah.
Yeah, he threw a punch.
Yeah, I know. And it was just like, when watching it, I'm like, the guy didn't really do anything. Kelce caught the ball in the back of the end zone. Play was over. The guy kind of went to swat at the ball. You know how a lot of players will do that after a player scores. And Travis came in with a left haymaker. And I was just like, whoa, come on, man. Thankfully, they had helmets on.
It's kind of an extreme reaction to a minimal action. I mean, it'd be one thing if you kind of give him a little nudge on the shoulder pads, but to actually raise your hand and try to punch the guy when you are a tenured veteran on this team, not a good look. But
it's training camp, and it's hotter this year at their facility. So these guys are still dealing with acclimating to that weather and having to go through all the stuff you got to go through in during this time of year for training camp. These players they're gonna happen. Scuffles happen. It's a part of the game.
No, I'm with you on that. I get it. Like I said, though, definitely not the best look. So something to learn from. Hopefully you learn from it. You move on. Also, George Pickens and rookie Joey Porter Jr., his father played with the Steelers, as most everyone knows, got into it today.
Nice.
With Porter getting his chain broken at the hands of Pickens. Now, this isn't the same kind of dynamic because these are actually 2 young guys. You got a second year and a first year player going at it here. So, what I find interesting, and correct me if I'm wrong, with the exception of Bill Belichick, these are the two most tenured coaches where these fights have occurred. That being Mike Tomlin and Andy Reid, respectively. That would be correct, right?
I believe so.
The only other guy that comes to mind would be Pete Carroll.
Yeah.
Pete Carroll's been in Seattle quite some time too. But I guess what I'm saying is, I find it slightly interesting that guys that have been running these programs for so very long. It's official. Breaking news: Mets trade three-time Cy Young Award winner Max Scherzer to the Rangers. ESPN and multiple reports. And Ronald Acuna Jr. just now stole his 50th bag, makes him the first player with 20 home runs and 50 stolen bases prior to the start of the month of August. I guess what I'm saying here, Zap, is it's interesting from the sheer dynamic that these are coaches that are known for running very tight ships and usually not having their names or their team's names linked to this kind of behavior. So I guess it is a little interesting. I mean, what did Tomlin get hit for? That one time where it appeared that he was tripping a special teams player?
Yeah, it was on a interception return or a punt return, something
I
like
think it
that.
was a punt return, if I'm not mistaken.
It was against the Ravens. I remember that. I think it was
Yeah,
Monday
I
Night
almost
Football,
feel that
actually.
because it was the Ravens, you naturally are supposed to get a pass because those two teams literally hate each other.
Yeah, exactly.
And oddly enough, divisional play some years ago, Joey's father, Joey Porter Sr., led the charge amongst Steeler coaches in a fight with the Bengal coaches. This is still the Marvin Lewis era. As a matter of fact, if my memory serves me right, this was towards the end of the Marvin Lewis era with the Cincinnati Bengals.
Yeah.
But at any rate, with the Heat, I said it to Brett today on the phone. I said, families fight. A football team is a family. That's kind of the way I view this.
Oh, one of the key things going back to the Max Scherzer deal, what I just spoke about, that how he had a club or that there's a club option for next year. One of the things that was able to finalize this trade was that Max Scherzer retains his ability to opt out of his contract at the end of this season.
Very interesting. So I guess the Texas Rangers have the next few months to truly sell Max on how they do things over there.
Mm-hmm.
And possibly this culminates in a World Series run. Because the one thing that I said about super recently is the American League is very wide open.
Yeah.
Usual suspects, the Astros. Let's say hypothetically, if they make a deal with the Mets and acquire Verlander, that would be interesting. Now you have two teammates playing on opposite sides in the same division. I do think that the Scherzer-DeGrom thing is kind of interesting because just a short year ago, they were the two faces of the Mets rotation and two of the three most recognizable players in the team, obviously not including the polar bear Pete Alonso. So the New York Mets, I got to say, man, there's a couple of ways to look at it. Is it all a failure or is it acknowledgement that it wasn't working and you want to kind of, how would you say, cut your losses, so to speak, and try not to make it too bad?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of how I see it. I think, but it is kind of comical when the Mets spent all this money and so quickly they, I remember the preview and we both kind of hinted at it that given the age of these guys, this may have not been the wisest idea. They also let Chris Bassett walk. He's helping the Blue Jays this year.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. It's interesting. Do you view the Mets as a team that's far?
It's an interesting question because if this is a team that's far, then it brings the next question of, is Buck Showalter going to be retained after this year? Or is he
I think he can. because I feel that if it was about the manager, if they felt it was about the manager, he would have been the first to go.
Yeah, I think he stays.
I tend to agree, and I think it's not necessarily that the Mets are gleaming with confidence in him. I think it has more to do with the fact that they maybe had an honest moment with themselves and said, is there someone better right now to hire? And maybe the answer is no. I myself suspected that if they did can him, they would have gone back to the original person they wanted, which was Carlos Beltran, former two-time Astro, former Met, former Yankee, former Royal. He's made the rounds in Major League Baseball. He literally had to resign on his first day on the job as Mets manager because he was still linked to some of that caca that was going on in Houston. But I thought it was kind of crummy for him. I actually like Carlos, and I actually think that he would have done well. So I am curious. He gave the Yes Network a go. That wasn't the smoothest transition for him. But I do believe that in time, Carlos can be a manager. I also think that if the Yankees ever had the audacity to move on from Aaron Boone, I think next man up would be third base coach Luis Rojas, who oddly enough was the previous Met manager before Buck Showalter.
Oh, that's true.
Come to think of it, buddy, he was the manager when Dorney and I attended the 9/11 20th anniversary game. It didn't significantly ring a bell until I just mentioned it now, but yes, indeed, he was managing the Mets that season. Anything else you want to speak on with the looming trade deadline?
I think it's going to be interesting to watch, man, because the question is Justin Verlander, where will he go? Some people are talking about him going to Baltimore. Some people are talking about him going to Houston. The possibility of him going to the Dodgers. Dodgers, obviously, I think they were in on trying to get a Max Scherzer back out that way, and I don't think they're done yet. I think the Dodgers are also going all in because, in my honest opinion, the gap between the Braves and the Dodgers is quite big. The Braves are a damn good team. So I'm going to be keeping a close eye on that, and kind of see where these other players are going to be traded. Will we see any more Pirates go as we're seeing the Pirates are sellers? Will we see a team like the Angels make another splash to try to convince Shohei to stay after this season? So it's going to be interesting.
Well, it appears that all indications are that the Angels, for better or for worse, are not going to trade Shohei, and they are going to bank on themselves to retain him, which is super risky to me. I mean, I look at both sides of the spectrum. He is having a sensational season. Sensational enough that if he was traded to the National League, I think that he's done enough to win American League MVP. That would be unprecedented. As far as this year goes, the kid has a legitimate shot to break the American League record set last year by Aaron Judge's 62 home runs. He would be the first non-Yankee to do it. Will he get there? That's another question. I'm going to say no, but I think he's going to get very close. Now, as far as the season goes, this is a team that if the season ended right now, would be in the playoffs. How far they go, I'm really not sure. But they would be in the playoffs. And I believe that whenever you have a Shohei and you're going to have a Mike Trout who's been so thirsty to finally get some playoff action, it could end in a special way. Like, I'll put it to you like this. In the event that they win the World Series, I think it raises the stock, or even if they make it, I think it raises the stock for Shohei to want to possibly stay with that organization. But I don't necessarily know what's in his heart in terms of if being with one team truly means that much to him, like players of yesteryear. I can't answer that. I really don't know.
I think he's really enticed by the idea of playing with Scherzer, DeGrom, Valdi, and the numerous amounts of hitters that the Texas Rangers have. Just saying. But I know it's not happening.
You can't see this because the cameras are off, but Mike Zappi is definitely wearing his Homer hat right now. No, in all seriousness, you got to consider the Rangers a player. to make a push for him. I say it's between 6 teams. I think it's between both New York teams. You cannot count out. And that's another thing to take into consideration with the Mets trying to move on from some of these other guys. They might be very much in on Ohtani. I would have to think, and you have Senga there. Senga and Ohtani as your 1-2, that would be interesting. The New York Yankees, I think it goes without saying, you have to consider them a player and a favorite. They have had a history of signing prolific Japanese players over the years. Hideki Irabu didn't work out. Hideki Matsui definitely worked out. And we got Ichiro Suzuki late in his career, but he made an impact even as an older player. You also have Masahiro Tanaka, who had a nice Yankee career. And in a shorter sample size, unfortunately ended to injury, Shin-Ming Wang did very well with the Yankees. So I would say that when the Yankees go after Japanese talent, it works out more often than it doesn't. So we shall see. And you have, obviously, the aforementioned Dodgers. You have the Giants. The Giants, I have a hunch, might get them because of the fact that they have shown that they're not afraid to spend the money. They had that Correa thing that fell through. That was in the $300 million range. We already have made fun millions of times on this show about Arson Judge when John Heyman accidentally did a typo and also misinformed the world that Judge was going to the Giants. Ultimately, he signed the deal with the Yankees. But yes, I would say any team in California, and yes, even the Padres, should be in the mix. So I say your Californias, all those teams, the 2 New York teams, your team, the Texas Rangers, the team he's currently on, the Los Angeles Angels, and I would say dark horse would be Seattle. I got Seattle as a dark horse.
Yeah, the only other team that I would consider throwing in would be based on if they move, where they move to would be Tampa, because if you're going to move somewhere, you need to make a splash like that.
Oddly enough, if Tampa was to make a move this particular year, they have a decent amount of capital to offer, comparable to what your Texas Rangers do. In the end, I stick to what I'm saying. I think Ohtani stays. And the only way that you cannot feel too bad if you're the Texas Rangers, if you're the Los Angeles Angels, is if it culminates in a World Series victory. I think that's the only way. And I have alluded to this particular season, I feel that the National League is a lot more powerful than the American League. I think the American League still has the 2 best divisions, but I think, to put it bluntly, the Braves are the best team in baseball until proven wrong. The Dodgers, great regular season team over the years. But, whether it be the Mattingly era, the Torrey era, the Dave Roberts era, it has all culminated in only one world championship, and that was due to a pandemic season, which was no fans, with the exception of a short samples of fans during the playoffs at neutral sites. Definitely didn't have the same kind of ring to winning a season where you have 102 more games on the schedule. So the Dodgers, to me, have a lot to prove because I associate what the Dodgers are doing over the course of the last 15 years similar to what happened to the Braves of the 90s and the early 2000s, where the Braves consistently made world championships and National League championship series, consistently had a top 3 record in baseball, but once again, only have 1 championship to show for all of that.
Richie, we have some breaking news on a couple of topics, actually. This is very intriguing. It's actually NFL talk. The Pittsburgh Steelers have signed linebacker Quan Alexander, so we're seeing another veteran player that's still a damn good player getting picked up. And running back from the Indianapolis Colts, Jonathan Taylor has requested to be traded.
Oh, shit. Is that right?
Per Ian Rappaport, yep.
That's a reliable source. Wow. I did not see that coming. All right.
No.
I didn't know we were going to talk about this tonight, but this show has taken a turn. Jonathan Taylor. Okay, buddy. Jonathan Taylor. We know that he's coming off of an injury-marred season. We know that the year before, Many had him as the best running back in all of football, taking the crown away from King Henry. I expect a bounce back season from him. Obviously, up until this very moment, I was expecting it with the Indianapolis Colts. So I ask you, who is in on this guy?
Well, you're always going to say that it's likely he wouldn't be traded to an AFC team. I mean, would the Colts actually go and trade him to the Chiefs or Bills? I guess if the
No.
price was right. I mean, the Colts and Bills did make a trade last year involving Zach Moss and Naheem Hines. Man, there's a team out in Las Vegas that, they have a situation right now with their running back and Josh Jacobs where, hey, let's just rescind the tag, trade for Jonathan Taylor. Thank you for what you did for us your first 4 years in the league. Good luck to wherever you go next. So
Yeah,
there's
so
a
funny
team.
that you say that, because the second that you said what you just said, that was the team, the immediate team that I thought of that could potentially make the most sense. I'm looking around the NFL landscape. Where else would this make sense? Could Washington potentially make a play on him and pair him with Brian Robinson? After the Andrew Luck tampering accusation, that would just be comical.
Yeah, if I'm thinking about NFC teams, the dark horse team I would put would actually be Miami for Jonathan Taylor.
Well, I mean, Miami did commit a pick to a rookie running back, and they have two former 49ers there in the form of Jeff Wilson as well as Raheem Mostert. Man, possibly Miami. Does this change the landscape of the New York Jets even? Talking to Dalvin Cook, and they're like, whoa, wait, we get Taylor? Wait.
Well, they don't have a first-round pick to give up.
Yeah, they would actually have to go to later years, unless if they had the audacity to trade a current Pro Bowl talent. And I don't necessarily think the Jets would be willing to do that, given that they're trying to win right now.
Yeah.
The Raiders, instantly, knee-jerk reaction, hearing this information from you. Yeah, I would have to say that the Raiders would be the most logical because they can rescind the tag. Barkley did what he did. He signed with the Giants. Jacobs has yet to sign, and I'm not 100% sure that he is. And Jacobs could be a guy looking for a new home. Who knows? Maybe he ends up in Indy. It's so funny how these things happen. Ryan Shedd, good friend of the show, he's been here. Taylor won't move. I'm out. He may be right. Just because he wants to be traded doesn't mean that he will. So that is another caveat to this in a relatively new.
And what's crazy though is teams would come calling right away because you're talking about a guy who's still on his rookie deal.
Well, that's another thing. Guy in his rookie deal. The Colts have to have an honest moment with themselves and say, is this somebody that we could re-sign? I think he just made that evidently clear that he's not going to re-sign with them. I'll tell you where he makes sense now that it just popped in my brain. You know where he makes sense? The Minnesota Vikings.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one, actually.
No Dalvin Cook anymore. We have said recently, you said it, I said it, John Olsen said it, that Olsen was probably the least critical of Madison. He said he'll get some good fantasy numbers. I think that was just John saying he's their starter. But yeah, if you trade him to an NFC team, that could be the potential one that you trade him to. And while Minnesota's defensive issues are still very much defensive issues, that could really light up the offense. You're getting a top 5 running back. You already have arguably the best receiver in the league. You have a Pro Bowl quarterback. You drafted a potential Pro Bowl talent opposite of this Pro Bowl perennial receiver you have and you also have a top 5 to 6 tight end in the form of TJ Hawkinson. So offensively, should the Vikings pull the trigger and try to get this guy, like I said, Yeah, they still have issues on defense, but that offense would be fun to watch.
Hey, if I'm the Bears, I'd make a call too.
I mean, why not?
Your your starting running back right now is Khalil Herbert with Deontay Foreman as your backup. You put a guy like Jonathan Taylor in that offense. They would definitely be the number one rushing offense, and it would actually open things up for the receivers.
You put Jonathan Taylor in that offense. Number one, he doesn't have to move far, and number two, I think it gives them legitimate hopes of being an honest contender off the rip. I predicted them to, I believe, go 8-9 on our North show. You add a Jonathan Taylor, that's an 11-12 win team this particular year. Oh, Ryan Shedd making another good point. He's hanging with us. Don't forget about the Rams. Maybe.
That was the team that I wanted to say.
But there's a
Look at
problem.
that.
But
Oh
there's a
man, I
problem.
just caught this one.
There's a
I
problem
think they're
with
putting. What's that?
the Rams gutted a lot of future draft assets. I don't think they could have them.
Yeah, not only that. This Rams team is going to look a lot different next year.
Well, you called
And,
for the hot take of a potential Aaron Donald trade, which I don't necessarily agree with, but you did mention it.
yeah, I do think I stand by it. I think he gets traded because I think they're going to be one of the worst teams in the NFC at least.
So you really are that low on the Rams this year?
Yes,
I got the win.
that defense is going to be bad.
Let's see. Let's just think about it for a moment. We haven't done our West preview yet. We could do a pre-preview. I would say that the 49ers likely sweep them. The 49ers usually sweep them. Even in the year that they won the Super Bowl, they had 2 victories over them in the regular season. I would say that even if the Rams are a bad football team, they should beat Arizona twice. And 2-4 in the division. I think it's a pretty safe bet that Seattle and the Niners sweep them. I think they can get 2 W's over the Arizona Cardinals, and they are also playing the NFC East this year.
Wow, I am very satisfied with the trade details. So they've just been released for the Max Scherzer deal. So the Rangers obviously received Scherzer, and the Mets will pay all but $22.5 million of Scherzer's contract this year. The New York Mets are only receiving Luis Angel Acuna. So they didn't even have to give up Leiter. They didn't have to give up Brock Porter.
Whoa. Wait a minute.
Love this.
They just traded a future Hall of Famer who they're going to pay most of it for Acuna's little brother.
Luis Angel Acuna, man.
That is a family.
He's gonna be a stud.
That is a family relation, correct?
I believe so.
I'll look into that, but damn, dude, I think it's safe to say you guys did.
Yeah, that's his. Yeah, they're brothers. That's
I
right,
saw this knucklehead on a trash talk page for the Mets and Yankees saying that the Rangers were suckers for pulling this move. I'm like, the hell they are if all you're giving up is one player for a future Hall of Famer. Now, I get it. This is not the Max Scherzer that was in his prime in Detroit or that helped the Washington Nationals, but you are still getting a top 20 pitcher, to basically help hold off the Angels and the Astros. I think that's a great trade for you.
Yeah.
And I don't think you're done. I think you're going to add you're still have that same dilemma that my team has. You're still looking for the left fielder. Andrew McCutchen could be a reliable fix. I also think the Pirates in general could be sellers. Not quite sure if that's a thing. The Brewers are a team that could be sellers. So it's going to be an interesting next 10, 12 days or whatever have you before this actual deadline occurs.
Ooh, Brett's boy, Eli Apple, has signed with the Jalen Ramsey-less Miami Dolphins. Super Bowl.
As much as I make fun of Eli Apple, I think it's a responsible signing in the sense that you're acquiring a veteran while your superstar heals. It's a band aid. Uh, I love to make fun of Eli Apple because he was one of the worst picks in New York Giants history. But I must say that you could do worse at cornerback than him, but he ain't all that either. He does get, as Idris likes to say, he gets cooked all the time. He definitely got cooked in the Super Bowl a couple of seasons ago, but when you consider what's out there and how much time left before the season actually starts, I actually am going to say that this is a quality signing for the Miami Dolphins. He's not going to, take away half the field like a Jalen Ramsey can, but it's a responsible addition.
Yeah, it definitely is.
And you know
It's an
what else?
addition that needed to be made.
We play Miami this year.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir. So
We don't play Miami till later in the year when Jalen Ramsey is back.
I have to relook at the schedule to know what week we're playing them, but what I will say off the jump is it would be cool to go head to head with Eli Apple because, quite frankly, I can't stand that dude. But
That'd be the one game you guys sign Kenny Galladay back for, and he just blows up.
Galladay better play free for that game. After all the money we gave. My God, what a terrible signing by Dave Gettleman. Dave Gettleman made a couple of quality moves. I mean, after all, the Odell trade did bring us Dexter Lawrence, but man, he made some horrible moves.
But no, I agree. Yeah, definitely. But I agree. I think this signing by the Dolphins, as we were going to talk about injuries, and we know that Jalen Ramsey underwent successful surgery on his meniscus, and they didn't know the extent of the surgery until they actually got in there. They had to do a complete reconstruction, and because of that, he's going to be out till December. So I think that's a good quality signing because their guy they drafted a couple years ago, Noah, I have no idea how to say his last name, cornerback out of Auburn. He has not played at a first round level since he was drafted. So they needed to get some insurance in there, especially with Byron Jones not back. And you still have Xavier Howard. You still have a great safeties out there, but they were going to be susceptible to the pass with that number 2 cornerback, and that kind of helps out the situation.
Gotta love this take by our buddy Ryan Shedd. Eli Apple, burnt toast. He's arguably the worst first round pick the Giants ever made. I'll give you one that could rival that. I got a couple in my brain, but I would have to say Eric Flowers is also in the conversation as just pure shit. Ramsey still isn't the same player as he was in Jax. He has slowed down, and when he comes back, he won't be the same player. I respectfully disagree with you, Shed. I do think that he did labor through a couple of injuries in the past. And to be frank with you, similar to another Hall of Famer, Mr. Randy Moss, I think Ramsey has had a propensity for taking plays off.
I still think he's one of the top cornerbacks in the league. I mean, the guy still takes away half the field.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I still think he's up there. The best corner right now in the NFL, this might be a little crazy to say it because it's only his second year, but I'm actually confidently going with Sauce Gardner. I also think honorable mentions, Diggs of your team, as well as Jair Alexander out in Green Bay. And I also think Patrick Surtain is ascending.
Yeah, Surtain he's a stud. I mean, that was someone that Dallas was looking into a couple of years ago. Instead, we ended up with Micah Parsons, so I'm not complaining.
That draft annoyed me on a lot of levels because I believe the Giants originally wanted Devontae Smith, but when Denver surprised everybody and took Surtain, it kind of screwed up the trajectory because, to your point, Dallas ended up with Micah but wanted Surtain. My frustration is that even if you guys, let's say hypothetically, you guys would have got Surtain, I'm not convinced the Giants would have picked Micah anyway. I think the Giants would have picked Devontae Smith, assuming that the trade didn't happen, and because the Denver move kind of started a domino effect for other things to happen. That
It
was
was
an
the
interesting.
Panthers move that did it,
Yes, you're correct. Yes, the Panthers did make a move as well. You are correct.
going after J.C. Horn, and then right after that it was Surtain, and it was like, what the hell just happened?
Let me ask you this. I guess it's a cool story that Joey Porter Jr. ended up with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Do you think my New York Giants made the right move choosing to take Banks as opposed to going Joey Porter? Banks does have the best vertical amongst players at his position during the combine. And I do think that could be an invaluable asset to his game when you consider how athletic some of these guys he's going to be running into. You're talking about the CD Lambs, you're talking about the A.J. Browns, Devontae Smiths, as well as Terry McLaurin.
I think, to me, when I look at Deontay Banks, first of all, he's long, and that's a really good thing as a cornerback. But what he reminds me of, he does have that long jump, as you said. He reminds me a lot of a Byron Jones. He's a guy that's going to be there all the time, but he's not going to get many interceptions. Whereas I see Joey Porter as the guy that is going to get more interceptions in the league. Let's put it that way. Deontay Banks does have the speed, but he just, in college, I'd have to double check, but I'm fairly confident that he was only able to get one interception throughout his 4 years while at Maryland. So, and that's the one thing that worries me about him. But he's gonna have, I think he'll have a high number of passes defended and things like that. Not early on. He's gonna have his struggles. I highly doubt they're gonna put him out there to cover CeeDee Lamb week one.
No,
Um,
God, I mean you still got Adoree Jackson as the big dog in that cornerback room. You still have Robinson from UCF. This is potentially a make or break year to see if he's going to have an impact worth the Giants feeling like they want to keep him around. I will say this with the comparison with Porter and Banks. Yes, I agree with you. I do think Porter will definitely have more interceptions, but I also think Porter's game plays the risk of getting burned a lot more frequently, similar to how Diggs was a little earlier in his career before he started making a concerted effort to get coached up and to avoid getting burned as much. And sometimes when you do that as a player, the interceptions will go down, but so will the burnt toast moments, So it's a give
yeah,
and a
we
take.
saw that. Yeah,
And it's
what
a
I was
very
gonna say, we
lonely
saw that a
position. I
lot.
must admit, it's a very
Yeah, I
lonely
know.
position because, sometimes being the GOAT or being the hero is literally a couple of feet because
Inches.
inches. Yeah, it is one of the most difficult jobs on a football field, regardless of the level that you're playing on. Anything else you want to add here, Zappy, before we fly out of here?
Just the whole, I guess, might as well make mention, we have Joe Burrow, who also got carted off the field. Thankfully, it's not a season ending injury. He's the second starter this early training camp that has gone down with a calf strain. The only thing that worries me with him is it's his right calf. And as we know, he is a right handed quarterback. So I think it's going to affect him because the right leg is the leg he uses to push off when he's throwing a pass, So that's the only thing that worries me about this injury with him. I mean, obviously, I think he'll be back, but I don't think he'll be suiting up week one against the Browns. I think he might be going week two, if not week three for sure. But it's just unfortunate because it's 3 years in a row that he's missing training camp. Last year, he had the appendix issue that caused him to miss training camp. And the year before that, obviously the torn ACL and all that. So it's like this guy can't catch a break at training camp, but hopefully he returns at a high level because I do enjoy watching him play.
Oh no, he's a phenomenal quarterback. Off to a hell of a start in his career. Let me ask you this: in terms of games missed, for him to make the proper recovery in your eyes, how many games do you think, from a responsible, safe level, should the Bengals have him sit out? I mean, of course, every athlete is different in terms of how they heal. I'm just kind of asking for a ballpark estimate.
I think the proper time frame for him to heal, just based on seeing it from other people,
Late September, right?
I would say um, 6 to 8 weeks, probably towards the 8 week mark, which would put him in right at week 3, week 4 time frame. So yeah, last two
Yeah.
weekends of September.
Because if this injury occurred, say, right before the season as opposed to a month before, it would essentially be week 8, week nine, something like that.
Yeah.
Let me do this. Who is his backup? Not
Oh
something
man,
I have necessarily thought about.
I hold on. I'm gonna look because I feel like I know who it is, but I'm just drawing a blank.
I also left my phone on the other side of my house, so that's not helping my cause right now to look this up, but I was just honestly curious.
Oh, Trevor Simeon. I knew that.
Trevor Siemian, former Bronco, former Jet.
Super Bowl winning Trevor Simeon. Don't take that away from him. Doesn't matter if he didn't play.
I've got a couple of hot takes I want to throw at you since we're coming up a little under the 10-minute mark. I still think the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to be a pretty bad team this year, but I'm calling for a somewhat of a career resurrection for Baker Mayfield. I think Baker Mayfield is going to play very well, despite the fact that Tampa has too many issues. I also believe that Rachaad White is going to live up to what he said, that he is going to be the first 1,000-yard rusher for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers organization since Doug Martin. So I got two hot takes pertaining to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Hot take number 2. I think Eric Gray is going to ascend on the Giants' depth chart, and he is going to be a factor in that running game alongside Saquon Barkley. I'm going to say that. And while the 49ers do not have to make any trades just yet, because Trey Lance, just like Brock Purdy, they're both under team control, I think Trey Lance will start getting disgruntled and will look for a way out of San Francisco. And let's not forget, they also have Sam Darnold there, who the coaching staff is very confident in.
I'm not trading. I don't care how disgruntled he gets. I'm not trading him unless if I get the right equity back, because I gave up a lot to draft Trey Lance at number 3.
It's a crazy situation. It truly is a crazy situation that they got over there. But I think in some ways it can be deemed as a good problem to have. Because I got news. I think Sam Darnold could get it done over there, and he's probably going to be an afterthought, because you would have to think that after what happened last year, Purdy gets the first crack.
Yeah, and he's been cleared. He's been fully cleared, so I'm fairly positive they're going to go back to Purdy. He was the hot hand. Why go away from that? I think it's going to be a good competition. I mean, from what the players have been saying, Trey Lance has made leaps and bounds of improvements to his passing game. His mechanics have changed some. So, I think it's going to be a very interesting training camp. And that's definitely one of the positional battles amongst the NFL that I'm really going to be watching, because I think a lot of people want to know who's going to be under center come week 1 for that 49er team, because this is a team that was close. They could have made it to the Super Bowl if Brock Purdy plays that whole game against the Eagles.
I mean, shoot, or if Jimmy Garoppolo activated himself, I go back to the way Jimmy was treated. I feel that Jimmy made a personal decision to not be active for that particular game because of the way that the 49ers kind of did him. I think the 49ers, if you follow their history, more times than not, they do business pretty well. But if there was something for me to point out, I, for one, don't really care for the way that they dealt with the Jimmy Garoppolo situation. This is a man that played in a Super Bowl for your organization. This is a man that had you a few plays away from another Super Bowl appearance. And this is also a guy who, quite frankly, wins a lot more than he loses. And I felt that the disrespect was pretty real and pretty uncalled for. Having said that, 49ers, in my estimation, going into this new year, definitely a top 3 team in the NFC. And I would have to say that it's a pretty intriguing quarterback situation. The most intriguing.
Yeah, it's without question the most intriguing quarterback situation right now. The other most intriguing one would be, when is Kyler Murray coming back? Is he going to play at all this year, coming off of that ACL tear, knowing that this is probably his last year in Arizona?
Our resident 49er fan, hang on one second. Ryan Shed, he wasn't ready, Richie. He got off-season foot surgery. If Shed says it, I believe it, for the simple fact that he indeed is a 49er diehard. I may have jumped the gun on that, but I do stand on what I said about the way he was treated, though. Not a big fan of that. Looks like he and Devontae Adams are doing their due diligence to get along and try to build a rapport.
That's why if you get them a running back over there by the name of Jonathan Taylor, that'd be a fun team to watch.
Way too early to say this. Shed just said here on the show he doesn't think Taylor's going to get moved.
No,
I don't have an opinion. I don't have an opinion just yet, but I will say this. If the Colts are honestly going to be listening, I believe that the best trade partner could potentially be, or the most sensible one, could potentially be the Minnesota Vikings.
That'd be a good one. It takes them out of the conference. That's always number one. Little score update for you. Your Yankees are up 5-3. It is the top of the 6th. Bases loaded. It is now 8-3. Top of the 6th for your Yankees. So they are opening this game up right now. IKF hit a double to left and scored Judge, Rizzo, and Stanton. And then the Rays are down 11-2. My Rangers are down 4-0. Josh Hader, he's coming. See, that's what they're doing. They're making sure that they lose where he doesn't have to come in and pitch. I like it.
I want to say one other thing about this Mets deal. Acuna may very well be a great player, but you still should have got a little more in that deal, in my opinion.
And, here's why I love it. Both Corey Seager and Marcus Semien are going to be our starting shortstop and second baseman for the next 6 to 8 years. Acuna is ready to come out now, and he's an infielder. We just brought in who looks like he's going to win the American League Rookie of the Year in Josh Young. So the infield was set for the Rangers. That's a trade they were easily able to make, and they did it. And I love it. I love what Chris Young is doing right now. I absolutely love it. And now they still have other prospects out there, because that's how many we have, to go out and get a bat and a relief pitcher. I love it. I'm going to be glued to the waiver wire, not the waiver wire, but the transaction wire these next few days, just hoping to see more trades come on for Texas.
Last thing I want to ask you, Zappy, we talked off air earlier today about the New York Jets and about the difficulty coming out of the gates for that team. What is your prediction for the first half of the Jets season? I guess my question is, when do you think this team's going to click and kind of say, hey, guys, we're at the table. We're a real contender?
They're going to click after week 6. I think they're going to start off to a 3-3 record. Chemistry comes into play. I think the defense is going to be damn good. But it's more on the offensive side, especially with the offensive line for the Jets. I think that's going to give them issues early on, and they are facing some pass rushing teams in the first 6 weeks. So I think after that 6th week is when they'll really get going. And it might very well be. Let me double check. I know I had told you that they play each other, the Broncos. It might be that game that really gets them going.
Yeah, that, as you know, Sean Payton.
So that's
said,
week 5. That's week 5.
Sean Payton said some disparaging remarks about Nathaniel Hackett. An apology can only go so far. There's definitely going to be some feelings on that. Coming up on the 15-second mark, For my co-host, Mr. Mike Zappi, I am your host, Richie, and also signing off for our buddy Ryan Shed. Thanks for participating in the show tonight, buddy. Like and subscribe to the channel, Richie X Jr. Sports Pod on YouTube. Have a great night, everyone.